Hey, what's going on, guys? Indy here with Ultimate Tool Reviews, and this is going to be one of your biggest, baddest miter saws that you can buy because it's going to be a 12-inch miter saw, meaning you got a 12-inch blade. This one is corded. Now, there are cordless options out there, but of course, you know, anything with batteries is always going to run you more money. This is the Metabo HPT, the C12RSH3. Now, I've had this saw for, I think, like 1 or 2 months now, and I've kind of delayed making this review because they didn't even have the product page up yet. All I had was kind of the specs in the box. There wasn't really any other information about this saw really up for, you know, online really to easily get to. So I wanted to wait till the actual information was posted, some of the other reviews got out as well too, to kind of really see what this saw had and make sure I wasn't really missing anything that was kind of key there, because Metabo HPT wouldn't even tell me any other specs about it. They just said, here's the saw, there you go. So I kind of had just the saw here, and I've been playing with it for the last couple of months now, doing some small project with it here and there. My preference for what I do for mostly miter saw stuff, and I'll bring the other saw here too, is I've got the Makita 36 volt. I got a 10-inch miter saw, and I definitely love that thing a lot because, of course, I've got no cord, but a lot of times in the larger saws, when you can get a cord, you definitely get a lot more power. And this thing, if you're wondering, hey, should I go cordless or corded when it comes to miter saws? If you want a lot of power, really fast cutting, and noticeably more RPM, you're going to want to go for a corded miter saw. Now, in some stuff like reciprocating saws, you can always have more power now in a cordless saw, whereas miter saws, we are still in the corded realm here. So you want more power, you have to go corded on these. Now, of course, you're going to spend a lot more money going that cordless route, but going this corded route, this thing's actually a pretty solid deal for what you're getting. And depending on if you like the features and the setup of this thing, if this is your ergonomics, this might be the saw for you. All right, let's take a look at this fence. This is coming pretty much right out of the box. I've used this thing for a number of cuts now, but I have not touched the fence. Mostly used the thing for a lot of rough cuts, but let's see how good this fence is out of the box. Haven't touched it. That is really good, actually. Looks like we are just where we need to be here for that fence being nice and square. Let me check the rest of it. This side is good. Looks like we're just a tiny bit out on the left side of the fence here. Just a hair out by like maybe half a degree there, but very good out of the box performance here so far. We've got a number of bevel stops in here. Let's check this out. I do know that this saw is very heavy, and it is a good amount of pressure to move this to the bevel stops. There we go, hit the bevel stop there. Definitely takes a bit of force to move this saw left and right. And of course, when you get these double bevel miter saws, you got a lot of the weight hanging off the back here. That's quite to be expected, unfortunately. Man, this thing is heavy. Oh. Back to square. Now we do, of course, have the XLED exact cut, and you can slightly see that shadow line there. It's kind of hard to see here in the daylight. I do kind of prefer lasers myself, depending on your preference. The nice thing with the shadow line, though, is it gives you exactly where that blade is going. It's not a laser that's going to be off to the side, but when you use a shadow cut, you're getting exactly where that blade is cutting. That is the big difference there. And this thing is so smooth to use. It is really, really nice here. Nice smooth cuts every single time. Definitely really happy with the power. You can definitely tell when it doesn't bog down. A lot of like the 36 volt Makita saw I've got, it does bog down on some stuff that you're like, wow, really, it's not that thick and hard to go through. But when you have a corded saw, it doesn't bog down at all. Especially a lot of these newer saws with a lot more powerful motors. All right, here's a better view of that shadow line. You can see that line coming right over where that blade is, and that is going to be, you can see that is right there. That is going to be right where my blade is going. So those are really nice. It kind of depends what you want to do. I mean, my Makita has the laser line, which once you understand where that line is and what part you're cutting, which side it cuts on, it's very simple to use. And I definitely like it for daylight more. Like, I'm in Florida, it's super sunny here, and I'm actually in the shade right now. This is kind of the sunlight you're getting in the shade. If I was in full sun here, this would be a lot harder to see here, but having a shadow line makes it super easy to see exactly where you're cutting. So that makes it simple. Anyone kind of pick the saw up and know, hey, shadow line, I'm cutting right there on that line. I'm a bit disappointed in the brake on this thing. So I'm going to basically put my hand on the trigger. We're going to start this thing up, and I wait till it sounds like it's going full blast. And I'm going to take my hand off, Notice how long this thing takes to stop. Decent a bit of time there compared to some other saws that I've tested that feel like they can stop in about half that time. Now, the one thing that stands out to me that doesn't really feel like really good quality is going to be the blade guard here. It just feels noticeably like it's not held on that great, like this could have been a better design. When you pull this down, you feel like this thing is moving along way too much. That's the only thing that stands out in the saw that's like, wow, this seems a little cheap compared to the rest of the saw. It's just that blade guard feels a little bit too loose to me, in my opinion. One thing I do love on this saw is the angle of the saw is very easy to set. All you gotta do is lift up on this, and then you can make that angle however you want to do it, and there is a stop back there at 0, which is really nice to have. Very, very smooth, not too hard to move though, so it is actually really ingenious, this design here. Stops right back at 0, lock that back down, there we are, good to go. All right, so I got the Makita and the Metabo here side by side. A couple of quick notes. You're looking at between these two saws, and I know it's not the best, comparison between these two saws. This is the Makita 36 volt 10-inch saw, and this is the Metabo HPT corded 12-inch saw here. One of the biggest things I've noticed from using both these saws, I will say the adjustments on the Metabo HPT are far easier than the Makita. The Makita is a bit hard to see stuff. You got the dust cover in the way, whereas the Metabo is much more compact and allows you to see all of your angles a lot easier. However, though, between the two saws, the Makita definitely has better bearings. Moving these saws forward and backward, the Makita easily takes the cake, a lot smoother. And I know I talked about the Metabo HPT dust cover feeling a bit too loose. Here's the Makita's. Definitely feels a lot more solid than the Metabos. I think it's just the overall design on those is just a little bit better than the Makita's in my opinion. Now, regardless if you want to go cordless, corded, it's kind of up to you what you really want to do. I just prefer the cordless option because I don't like dragging an extension cord out when I got to work on something. I like to be able to snap in 2 18-volt batteries. I'm good to go. I've been able to basically use this saw for pretty decent sized projects and change out batteries just like once a day. It really hasn't been a big issue for me using a cordless miter saw here. You can also see that your base on the Makita is a lot larger than the Metabo HPT. The Metabo HPT has a really small base here. I'm not sure why they did that design. My guess would be possibly for weight savings. Of course, with a 12-inch saw, to be weighing a lot more there. And here's what I mean by the Makita being a bit hard to make your angles. Here's the angle adjustment on the Makita. It's kind of blocked by, of course, your dust thing here and rather hard to see. I'm quite a bit zoomed in here with my camera. And again, it's not easy, whereas the Metabo HPT is right in front of your face and super easy to read. I definitely think the Metabo HPT is definitely the easier one to use when it comes to making angled cuts. Now, with both saws in their all the way back, all the way up position, you can see how much better of an angle the Metabo HPT has over that work surface than the Makita. So the Makita is still pretty far over your work surface there, whereas the Metabo is definitely way farther back and also way higher up there too. This Metabo did a fantastic job on the overall arm design, and it's a very beefy design. It's definitely way more back heavy than the Makita, so something to be aware of there definitely when you have this on a miter saw stand. Now, as for other things that I didn't really cover in this review that I don't really use myself is going to be things like dust collection. You've got a nice large dust collection port in the back of the Metabo HPT. You can easily plug a shop vac into there. Whereas the Makita, not so much. You're going to need an adapter. Metabo HPT is really nailing a lot of things here when I would arguably call the king of miter saws DeWalt. I've owned a couple of DeWalt miter saws. They just work. They're like the Toyota Camry of miter saws. Metabo HPT, though, they're coming in with some amazing values like this saw here, and this thing really is actually a nice saw to use here. My father-in-law, I asked him, hey, what's your favorite miter saw? And he says, yeah, I got a Metabo HPT. It's working like forever. I think he's had it for like 15, 20 years now, and he just loves it. Still works great. It's a corded miter saw, and I can't say that about the DeWalts that I've had. My DeWalts have always died for me in about 5 years or less. I've had issues with them getting rusty, some part breaking, the motor going. Not so much with a Makita or Metabo HPT saw. They just seem to be built a bit better than a lot of the DeWalts, whereas the DeWalts are just easy to use right out of the box, and they seem to work just fine for a couple of years or so. So guys, that's kind of all my thoughts on this saw. Great features so far. Nothing that really stood out to me that is just bad on this saw that I would just say, oh, they really messed that up. They did a fantastic job overall. A couple little nitpicky things here, with the blade cover. Not a big deal. And of course, one last thing too is kind of your preferences. Which style of handle do you want? pros and cons to both. I don't really mind this style too much, and I wish the safety switch here was a little bit bigger. The Makita here is definitely a bit bigger, a bit easier to press. But again, really small stuff here that you can tell between these two. If you were to paint these, you know, both the same color and tell me, hey, which one's a Makita, which one's a Metabo HPT, I couldn't even tell you. They're actually so similar that it's really, really hard to tell. So yeah, the Makita is going to have a bit more quality, but Metabo HPT is definitely going to give you a lot more value. So you're looking for a new miter saw, Metabo HPT. Man, they are just the king of value. I really cannot stress that enough. They just do an amazing job of keeping a ton of value there between these saws and all their tools here. Whereas this Makita, I think this thing was like in a kit cordless, or with a cordless package there of like 2 batteries and a charger. I think this thing was like $1,100-$1,200. Pretty expensive tool here for being able to do the same thing and more with a 12-inch for quite a bit cheaper. I think almost half the price here. But again, you're going to be running a cord on this saw, and that's unfortunately what you're going to have there. Of course, this is a brushed saw, so you have brushes on the top as well too. And that is going to be about it for this saw. It just works good. I don't really see any real major downsides with it, other than, of course, a few small things. But everything that I've tested the saw so far, for what I've used in this thing, it cuts through everything like butter. And of course, you're comparing it to a cordless saw. It's going to have less power in your cordless option, or your cordless options. So Metabo HPT, I think they really hit out of the park with this saw. Fantastic shadow line there. They did everything right with this saw. So guys, thanks for watching. Take care. Have a great day and stay safe out there.